Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we're going to be doing another builds and loadouts video. This is for advanced players with Commando. I'm not going to be going over the passives, as many of you guys have pointed out in the Berserker one. It's not really necessary to reiterate them on the advanced guides, because I'm betting that a lot of you guys are more higher leveled and trying to beat difficulties like Suicidal and Hell on Earth. So I'm just going to go over the builds. For this, we're going to have two builds because Commando really only kind of has two builds. You can kind of mix and match them, but they're kind of distinct in their own way, and they're going to feel like one another if you kind of mix and match. We're going to be going over potentially 5 to 6 loadouts with this, so I'm sure there will be something in there that you find useful. So our first build is going to be the pretty standard Commando that you see pretty often and that most people are going to run. For level 5, we're going to take high capacity magazines. You could take tactical reload. This is completely your choice as to which one you like. I like the bigger magazine size, but you could go with faster reloads. That's fine too. At level 10, I would recommend always starting out with fallback, because fallback gives you increased damage with your 9mm and your knife. The weapon switch speed is actually a pretty decent reason to keep it into the later rounds if you don't want to go with impact rounds, but starting out with fallback is going to give you a huge advantage at the start of a match, because your 9mm pistol and your knife are going to be doing so much more damage that you can get through the early waves pretty easily and save up potentially more money that way. You could switch over to impact rounds later to get that extra stumble perk, or to get that extra stumble power. You don't need to though. The weapon switch speed is still pretty nice with fallback, and I generally don't switch off of it, but it's completely your call. At level 15, I would also always recommend starting out with Tenacious. 25% more health and more armor just makes it so much easier for you to survive the very first wave. After that, you can switch off, and there's really no reason to take Prepared early on, because you're just not going to simply have enough money to buy all the ammo. So for the first 2 to 3 waves, it's probably best not even to bother switching. Later on, you can. If you want to have more ammo for your weapons, that's perfectly fine. And then at level 20, we're going to go with hollow point rounds. This just gives you bonus damage. This is going to be important for at least these builds. We will be switching over to Eat Lead in the other build, which we'll go over later in this video. And then at level 25, you can pick between Tactician or Machine Gunner. Both are fine. Both are pretty good. You know, the Machine Gunner, the 3% more damage is extremely neglectable. It's not worth really considering. It's mostly that you're going to be getting 3 times shot speed, which is the big sell of it, where Tactician you can reload in real time during Z time, and then switch weapons faster, so you can potentially extend the Z time longer. So whichever one you want. I tend to go with Machine Gunner, but just letting everybody know that 3% bonus damage for your assault rifles is almost nothing for most of your assault rifles. Most of your assault rifles don't have ridiculous damage numbers. Anyway, starting out, you have your AR-15. Basic gun that you start out with Commando. This is probably Commando's worst gun right now. It used to be their second worst gun because the bullpup was weaker than it, but now it's probably the worst. It's not a bad weapon though for the early waves. You can still one-shot headshot Zeds with it. I would recommend always using this in semi-auto fire. The burst fire on it is just usually not worth it. You're so much more likely just to be wasting ammo with it than actually getting kills. So, 1 round at a time helps. No real tips with this weapon, just shoot all the small stuff and get rid of it when you can. You can hang on to it for the first couple waves though, just so that you don't need to buy another gun. That's usually what I do. But if you are going to buy another gun in the early waves, I would recommend selling this and buying the Tommy gun, and just not buying any ammo with the Tommy gun. Just the Tommy gun itself, because the Tommy gun has a lot of extra ammo, because it has such a large magazine, and you get ammo according to the magazine. Your 9mm is actually really strong with fallback. It's one of your most powerful weapons, actually, once you fully upgrade it. It does still lag DPS compared to later weapons, but it can do a really high amount of damage per shot. Since it does 25 base and you get 85% bonus damage with this, it's quite powerful to start out with. It's I believe it's pretty similar to the 1911 in base damage once you have fallback. I think it can shoot a little bit faster, and obviously you get 15 rounds rather than just 8. So you do have an advantage there. Plus, this is free. It's also really good if you can find a second 9mm early on and you're running fallback. Your knife is also not terrible as a weapon. You can use it, and it works fairly well. It's not like it's not as devastating as somebody's, you know, starting weapon like Berserker, or even Berserker with their knife, which is usually something you don't really see unless people are just messing around. But it can work. You can light attack and stab small Zeds. So the first weapon that we're going to go with this build is the Medic 401 assault rifle. This is a pretty strong weapon. It's it's extremely strong in multiplayer. I'm playing this in solo just so that I can get the weapons and make this video a little bit faster. But it's extremely good in multiplayer. It's a pretty strong rifle. It holds 45 rounds regularly. With the high capacity magazines we're running, it's going to hold 60. So that's a bit nicer. It has pretty good ammo pickup in that way, because picking up 60 rounds per box is actually really nice. It has decent damage. Its scaling with upgrades really isn't fantastic or anything, but it's alright. For this build, we're not going to be upgrading it at all. Actually, we're not going to be upgrading it at all in this video. You can upgrade it with certain other weapons, though, if you would like to. If you'd like to pair it with something like the Scar or the AK, then you can. But for this video, we're not going to be using those weapons with this. Those weapons work fine as well, and they will be showcased later on in the video with a different build, but not with this particular one. This weapon also has very little recoil, so it's pretty easy to control, even if there is Zeds right on top of you, as you can see. Its secondary fire is, of course, the medic darts, which can apply poison, but they're usually not used for that. You want to use them to heal up your teammates. If you're playing solo like I am, you can use them for poison, but it's not gonna give you, you know, an insane advantage or anything. Alright, for our next weapon that we're gonna use with this loadout, it is the FAL. This is probably the most common and honestly probably the strongest combo that Commando has at the moment. Using this rifle to heal allies and to just deal with generally small stuff, and then using the FAL to kill anything large. The FAL is your most powerful weapon. You cannot have any upgrades with either of these weapons in this loadout. You can upgrade your pistol still if you'd like to do that. I usually keep the FAL on full auto and then just store it while I'm using the medic rifle for the majority of the wave. I'll use the medic rifle for anything small or medium, so any sort of husks, bloats, sirens, crawlers, stalkers, anything like that. I'll generally use the medic AR on. Anything like Skrakes or Flesh Pounds, though, if need be, I will use the FAL. You can use the FAL on small enemies too. If you're doing that, I tend to use it in semi-auto fire, just because it's a little bit easier to handle. The FAL without levels is actually really hard to control. If you're level, 0 to 10 or so with Commando, this weapon can feel very uncontrollable. And in that case, weapons like the Medic AR, the M16, even the AK feels more controllable than the FAL in full auto. But this does give you at least some options to deal with things like Flesh Pounds. You can kill them fairly quick with this. And you're still not going to be like a dedicated big game or big Zed killer, I guess. You're not going to be like Sharpshooter or Gunslinger, but you now have the ability to kill things like Skrakes and Flesh Pounds very quickly. Alternatively, if you wanted to upgrade the Medic AR, if you were really liking that and didn't want to go with the FAL for whatever reason, I would recommend going with like the AK. The AK in its burst fire mode does a lot of damage per second and can kill large things like Skrakes and Flesh Pounds fairly quickly. Themes that you're going to see pop up in almost all the loadouts, well actually all the loadouts with Commando that I'm going to be showing, is that they are expensive. You do need a lot of money because almost all the weapons include tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5 weapons. So the second loadout with this exact same build is not using the FAL, but using the medic rifle. The other medic rifle with the medic rifle. So the 401 and the 501 medic rifle. The 501 has the medic grenades in it. It weighs 8, so once again, no upgrades for this loadout. Because you're taking up all the weight. This is mostly for supporting the team. This is probably your strongest team loadout, assuming your team is doing at least decently well. That might not always be the case, and in which case the FAL you more likely want to have, because at least then you can kind of protect yourself from big things. This weapon you can't protect from big things as easy, but it does give you way more utility since you do get the aid of the medic grenades. Medic grenades are fantastic. You can create safe zones for the team. You can hold off choke points from enemies. You can heal your allies, which is great. One thing that you'll find out at higher levels is that medic weapons are really good and really useful for the team. If you don't have a dedicated medic, it's never a bad thing to be bringing medic weapons. Even if you do have a dedicated medic, it's still not a bad thing to be bringing weapons. Because the absolute worst that's going to happen is that you're going to have two weapons that are decently good, and you're not going to have to use the healing feature on them. Which isn't really that much of a downside. What is kind of a downside, though, is that this loadout is even more expensive than the last one we talked about. The 501 does cost more. You're going to be spending $1,500 minimum to get this, not including if you had bought weapons and armor earlier on, then it might be more. Or if you died at some point and you're just going to have to buy one of your medic ARs again. And we can show off one more loadout with this particular build, and that is the full damage Commando. So that is going with the FAL, and then honestly it's your call between the SCAR and the AK. The SCAR is a bit more accurate. You can hit things out to a longer range. The AK will do more overall DPS though. You can also upgrade the FAL if you would like. I would recommend upgrading the FAL over the AK. With either of these loadouts, or upgrading over the SCAR, because the SCAR and the AK don't scale as well as the FAL. Just getting more damage with it is going to help. The higher level you are with this build, the easier it is for you to run around with, because both the FAL and the AK have noticeable recoil, and minimizing that is great. Alternatively, if you don't want to upgrade either of these and you're fine just with the base damage of them, which is understandable, they're both pretty strong without upgrades, you could go with a medic pistol as well. This would allow you to have some healing for the team. Alright, so the second build that we have for Commando is kind of something like this. So at level 5, once again, you can go with high capacity magazines or tactical reload. I would recommend more for high capacity magazines with this particular build, because this is going with weapons that have larger magazines to start with, so they can make the most use of it. At level 10, once again, I would recommend starting out with fallback, but then you can switch over to impact rounds. I'm just going to have them on here just for convenience sake. At level 15, once again, I would recommend starting out with tenacious, but you could switch over to prepared if you would like to. It's not necessary, but you can. And then with level 20, we are going to be making use of Eat Lead. However, I usually don't use Eat Lead with these builds even. I usually still go with hollow point rounds, so hollow point rounds is still probably better. However, Eat Lead does give you a pretty big advantage at the start of the match. And that is that all of your guns that you buy have larger magazines, so you're naturally going to get more bullets overall. And for the starting waves, it really doesn't matter that you're not doing that 30% extra damage to the majority of enemies, because almost all the enemies are small, and almost all of any of your guns can one-shot, headshot any sort of small enemy. So that reduction in damage does not apply as much early on. It can with certain enemies like bloats, but even then, it's the more magazine is generally going to make up for that. But then, you know, as the wave goes on, obviously hollow points is going to do more damage with something like the FAL against flesh pounds and Skrakes, more so than just having a larger magazine will. So it'll be a better option early on, or Eat Lead will be a better option early on, but hollow point rounds will be stronger later on. With these builds, you can still get away with just having Eat Lead the whole time. And then at level 25, you can pick between Tactician and Machine Gunner again. It's your choice. So if you start out with this build, your AR-15 will not be holding 20 rounds like it does base. It'll be holding 50 rounds. So you get an additional 30 rounds to start out with. This also makes a pretty big difference when you pick up ammo boxes. I know it's kind of strange on this map because this is a custom map. But when you pick up an ammo box, you will get the equivalent of a full magazine worth of ammo. So rather than just getting the base 20 rounds or even 30 rounds if you're just running high capacity magazines, you can get up to 50 rounds extra, which is really going to help for those first waves, especially since this is another build that's not super cheap. It's not as expensive as like our double medic build, or double medic AR build, but it's not super cheap either. So with this first loadout, I would recommend getting the Tommy gun early on, and keeping the Tommy gun actually, because the Tommy gun with all the magazine increases has a 125 round magazine. So anytime you pick up any sort of ammo box, you are going to be getting all 125 rounds back to you, which just makes this gun insane for just the amount of sustained fire that you can do with it. And once again, in the early waves, it's not really going to matter that you're not doing tons of damage to big enemies, because big enemies are likely not going to be spawning this early on. So the Tommy gun is the first weapon I'd recommend, but it's not going to be your main gun for this loadout. The main gun for your loadout is going to be the Stoner. Now you could alternatively not go with the Tommy gun and instead go with the Stoner and the Bullpup. That way you could still upgrade your Stoner if you would like to. You could also go with an AR-15, but now that the Bullpup's buffed, it's just better. I would just recommend taking that. And once again, you can go, instead of eat lead with this, go with hollow point rounds. That's your call. This loadout is definitely the trash killing build. That's what your main goal with this build is to kill everything that's small. And generally you don't see this build very often, and there is a reason for it. It's because you don't do very well against big things with the Stoner or the Tommy gun, especially if you're going all ammo and no damage with it. You will have a lot of sustained fire, and you will have enough damage to kill any sort of small and medium enemies, but big enemies will really become an issue for you. Alright, and then our fifth loadout is going to be this, with the minigun. So with Berserker, I actually didn't cover really any of the DLC weapons. I partially just figured that not everybody could get them, but I figured I should probably cover the DLC weapons this time. And this is Commando's DLC weapon with the minigun. Now this is paired with the Bullpup. You can pair this once again with hollow point rounds, and that's usually what I do, to still have pretty high rounds with the minigun. This functions kind of like the Stoner build that we just showed, which is that it's very good at killing small and medium stuff. Against larger enemies, it's also not too bad, but you are at a disadvantage if a bunch of large things start trying to focus you. I would also probably recommend taking fallback with this loadout, just so that you have a faster weapon switch speed, because getting caught off guard really sucks with the minigun. You're moving slower with the minigun, even though you're doing pretty high damage and actually really high DPS. And switching over to your Bullpup is a much better run and gun weapon, but you need to be able to switch your weapons quicker, and the minigun switches weapons extremely slow. So I do recommend going with fallback and just keeping fallback with this particular loadout. Getting the Bullpup early on and then just saving up for the minigun. You will have some issues in the early waves because the Bullpup, once again, is not the best weapon in the game, but it's okay. You also can't upgrade the Bullpup whatsoever, because then you'll be overweight. You just can't take the minigun. And of course, the big downside to the minigun is that you have to have the DLC to use the minigun, or you have to be in a match where somebody has the DLC to the minigun. One thing I probably should go over as an advanced tip for Commando, which Commando benefits a lot from with pretty much all of their weapons, but the minigun and the Stoner in particular, and that is reload canceling. I mentioned this in my beginner build, I believe, when I was talking about beginner loadouts and how useful it is. And all that reload canceling is canceling the animation of your reload so that you can get back into the fight quicker. You can do this by just simply reloading your gun. This works with almost every gun. Certain guns it's just not worth doing with, but a lot of the Commandos are. Reload your weapon, and as soon as you see the ammo come into the gun, you can quickly melee attack, and then you'll be able to shoot. Minigun, this is still going to be a little bit slower because it has the wind-up time. So you're not going to be able to shoot instantly once you reload it, but every other weapon you should be able to. So let's see, we can do it with the Bullpup. So once you see the bullets in there, you can immediately melee attack, and as you've seen, I melee attacked but instantly canceled it by just firing the gun. So it's going to take some getting used to. and you can rush it and mess up the reload. But when you get it down, it will help you a lot, especially with weapons like the Stoner that have a very long reload time. But with the reload cancel, you save something like 2 seconds on it. So that's pretty nice. 2 seconds adding up every time you need to reload does actually help quite a bit. All right, and then I'm going to talk about one more loadout with Commando. And this is more of a meme loadout. It's a fun loadout that I enjoy. But it's not, like, amazing. So keep that in mind. And that is going with the Stoner, the C4, and a single Desert Eagle. Now this still gives you enough weight so that you could upgrade your Stoner, which is what I usually do. You could, instead of going with this, go with I also usually switch over to hollow point rounds using this build, just so that I do more damage with the Stoner and I feel like I'm actually killing stuff. This is the action hero build, at least that's what I call it. The Desert Eagle is a pretty decent backup weapon for if you run out of bullets with the Stoner, or if you need to shoot at long range. It's still good enough at doing that. Instead of using the Deagle, you could go with the 500, which is harder hitting and more consistent damage at longer ranges. This weapon still isn't... The Desert Eagle is generally strong enough to kill most small things. You will need to be hitting headshots somewhat regularly with it. So it's not the... Like I said, this build is not the strongest. It's not the strongest, it's not the best, but it is a super fun build to use. C4 is great for dealing with crowds or to deal with big Zeds, especially flesh pounds. And the Stoner you're probably just going to be using for everything else. Alright, so that'll do it for the advanced builds and loadouts with Commando. This one is pretty fun. Commando has a lot of pretty good weapons that work well together. I would still say probably that their best build overall is the Medic AR with most likely the FAL, but could be paired with something like the AK if you need something cheaper, or the M16. And even the weapons that I didn't cover in this video can still be used pretty well. I didn't cover the Scar, which is actually a pretty good gun, the M16, which is great, and the carbine, the MKB 42. All of those are pretty good, and generally anything tier 3 and above is good for Commando. Just get 2 weapons that you enjoy using or that are particularly strong and use them to your heart's content. Next time we're going to be looking at support, which is going to be a fun class because I really like support, and support has a lot of options. So we're going to be going over some builds and some loadouts with them, and that should be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so very much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you guys are new here, be sure that you're subscribed. And if you'd like to support the channel in any way, you can either go over to the Patreon and donate for just $1 a month, get videos in early access. Also, if you'd like to buy merch, the merch store is open. Feel free to go over there, pick up some stuff. There's tons of things over there. I'm sure you'll find something that you like. And be sure to use discount code REPEAT to get 10% off your total order. Thanks everybody for watching this, and I will see all of you guys next time. Till then, stay cool, and bye!